now, Halloween hounds. It is Blackmetalwerewolf making a brand new spooky video for you this week. And today, what I would like to talk about are horror misconceptions. At this point, horror movies have been around for over 100 years, and within that time frame, there are an awful lot of misconceptions surrounding the whole genre. So I thought it'd be interesting to do a video of me correcting just a few of the misconceptions in horror movies. Let's go back to one of the first horror movies ever made, Dracula. Now, of course, anytime someone wants to imitate Dracula, what do they say? I want to suck your blood. It's in pop culture pretty much everywhere when someone's imitating a vampire. Except for the fact that in the original Dracula, Bela Lugosi never actually says that line. As far as I know, he only played Dracula twice, and in neither of those movies does he ever say, I want to suck your blood. Obviously, the way they say it, they're saying it with his Hungarian accent, so they're imitating him. But where that line comes from, I'm not even 100% sure. The laugh at the end is obviously from the Count from Sesame Street, but the rest of it is a total mystery to me. So at no point does he ever say, I want to suck your blood. And it's strange that people really focus in on that one line that's never spoken, because if you ever watch Dracula, there's a lot of really good lines in that movie. Why people focus on a non-existent line and not any of the really good lines from the actual movie kind of confuses me. Now let's move on to Frankenstein. Of course, everybody knows the story of Frankenstein. A mad scientist with his hunchback assistant Igor dig up a whole bunch of dead bodies, sew them together with a human brain, and create the most famous monster in human history. Except for the fact that Dr. Frankenstein doesn't have a hunchback assistant named Igor. In the book, he does it all by himself, and in the first movie, he does have a hunchback assistant, but his name is Fritz, not Igor. It isn't until, I think it's Son of Frankenstein, where a character named Yegor is introduced, and he's not a hunchback. Granted, he is kind of weird. He survived a broken neck, so his back is kind of messed up, but he's not a hunchback assistant to Frankenstein. I think this may have come into play years later when the movie Young Frankenstein came out, and there was a hunchback named Igor. Actually, it wasn't Igor, it was Igor, to pronounce it correctly. But ever since then, that kind of trope has exploded into pop culture. Anytime Frankenstein is portrayed in a cartoon or spoofed in a movie or something, he has a hunchback assistant named Igor, even though he never did. And on the same note as Frankenstein, every time somebody imitates the monster, what do? They walk around with their arms stretched out like this, right? Now, to be fair, he does walk like that in later movies, like I think it was Son of Frankenstein and Ghost of Frankenstein, and he only walks around like that because the monster went blind. That's why he's walking around, so we can feel what the hell's going on in front of him. But in Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, he just kind of lumbers around with his arms to his side. So I guess it's not really a misconception. I just think it's kind of weird that people focus on this from a later movie that, to be fair, most people probably haven't seen. I just thought that was interesting. Now let's talk about the Wolfman. Of course, when it comes to any werewolf movie, there are two things you absolutely need. A shot of the full moon and a full werewolf transformation scene. Without those two things, you do not have a werewolf movie. Except in The Wolfman, you don't get either of those. In fact, in that movie, there's really no reference to someone turning into a werewolf under the light of the full moon. Unless, of course, you count the poem that's in that movie. Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. That is the only thing that kind of references a full moon, the autumn moon being bright. But in the movie, Larry Talbot turns into the Wolfman every night ever since he gets cursed. It has nothing to do with the full moon. In fact, the full moon has a lot more to do with the movie Werewolf of London that came out several years before the Wolfman. And as for transformation scenes, in the original Wolfman, there really isn't one. I mean, there is a scene where Larry Talbot sits down and you see his legs transform. They get really hairy, and then through a bunch of cross dissolves and he gets like the fake feet put on. And it kind of looks like wolf feet. So that's, if you consider that a transformation scene, I guess. You don't really get a really good werewolf transformation scene until Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. That's where you get the full moon and the cool transformation. Now let's move past the classic monsters and talk about Night of the Living Dead. It is the movie that kicked off the entire zombie subgenre, a subgenre that is so popular that is very strong and alive today. And of course, everybody knows the stories of zombies. There is some sort of virus outbreak that makes the dead come alive, the dead bite and eat the living. If you get bitten, you become infected, which will curse you to die and then reanimate and continue the cycle over and over again. That's classic zombie lore. Except that's not really what happens in Night of the Living Dead. In Night of the Living Dead, they keep the reason why the dead are rising kind of vague, but they do give some sort of an explanation. The Earth sent a probe to Venus, where it came back, it was carrying some sort of weird radiation, so they blew it up before it came down to Earth. But that caused the radiation to come down to Earth and make the recently deceased rise. So it's not some sort of virus infection, it's just some weird radiation from outer space. But what about the bites? Now in that movie, there is a little girl who gets bitten, but it's not the bite that turns her into a zombie, it's the radiation. She does get bitten, it does get infected, like a regular infection you would get from a dead person biting you, and that's what killed her. But it's the radiation that brought her back to life. Anyone dying in that situation who is recently deceased would be brought back regardless if they were bitten by the dead. It's the radiation that's doing it, not some sort of virus through a bite. I also think it's worth noting that for the movie that kicked off the entire zombie subgenre, at no point in the movie are the dead ever called zombies. I believe George Romero wanted to call them ghouls. He was a big fan of the movie The Last Man on Earth starring Vincent Price, where he's being harassed by these undead zombie-like creatures, and that's what he called them. And so George Romero saw that and he's like, okay, that's what my creature's gonna be called, ghouls. When it started calling them zombies, I'm not 100% sure. Personally, I do think the word ghoul is cooler than the word zombie, but it doesn't really matter what I think at this point. They're zombies. That's what it's been referred to from now for decades. They're zombies. No, sorry ghouls, you're kind of out of the picture. Now for this next one, I'm not 100% sure if it can be considered a misconception, but I do think it is worth pointing out. A lot of the movies that we know and love today from the past that are considered horror classics, when they came out, a lot of them weren't really well received, at least not by critics, and in few cases, even the fans. For example, a movie like The Thing or Alien. Everybody loves those movies now. They are a gigantic part of pop culture, they're referenced constantly in new horror movies. People love these movies. But when they came out, apparently they were panned by critics. And it's hard to believe that something that was so hated back then is celebrated now. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I love these movies just as much as the next person, and I'm glad they're being recognized for their genius. But at the time, to think that people hated Alien? Are you out of your mind? That movie's amazing. Or what about a movie like Halloween 3? Now it is being recognized as one of the best in the franchise, but when it came out, critics and fans absolutely hated it. And I know that these days, for the past several years, there's been a gigantic boom of 80s nostalgia pandering, and in my opinion, it is getting a little much, but it doesn't change the fact that those movies, even back then, I don't think it's pandering to say that now they're great and that they're being recognized for what they are. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of movies that really are jerking off the nostalgia pandering for the 80s, like that TV show Stranger Things. That TV show is nothing but a gigantic 80s circle jerk. But, you know, it is good to know that The Thing and Alien are really being recognized for what they are. So not really a misconception, but I thought it was worth pointing out. Okay, this video is dragging on a little long, so I'll just give you one more misconception. The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Of course, everybody knows this movie as a Halloween classic, but did you guys know that it's not? It's just a regular shitty movie. So those are all the horror misconceptions I'm going to say for this video. I know there are plenty more that I didn't put in this video, and there are probably even more that I don't even know about. So if you guys know about any more horror misconceptions or anything else you'd like to share with other horror fans down in the comments section, please leave them down there and share the information with everybody. I would even like to know even more about this stuff. I can talk about horror movies till the cows come home, so by all means share more information with me. I'd love to know what you guys have to say. And now, like my past October videos, I either do a horror movie recommendation or warning. And today is another recommendation. The movie is Unfriended Dark Web. Now, I remember when the first Unfriended movie came out in theaters, it looked like the stupidest thing in the world, and I ended up watching it on Netflix years later, and I was right, it's an incredibly stupid movie. But after that came out, Unfriended Dark Web came out, and for some reason, this went straight to DVD and not to the theaters, which is surprising because this is a far superior movie than the first. I'm not going to give away any of the plot because it will spoil it for you, but all I can say is this movie will make you fucking paranoid. Like, when I saw it, it wasn't like crap your pants scary, but it did make me very paranoid for my online security. And it made me go around and cover all the webcams on all my computers. It's that kind of movie that gets in your head and makes you think about it afterwards. And also, there is one kill in this movie that I think is just fucking brilliant. Like I said, I'm not going to spoil anything, but definitely watch it and you'll probably be able to figure out which one I'm talking about. So definitely check it out, Unfriended Dark Web. So that's it for today's video. If you like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe, leave me a comment letting me know what you thought of today's video, checking out some of my past videos, and sharing them with a few of your friends while you're at it. If you'd like to keep up with me on a more daily basis, you can follow me on Facebook and on Instagram. I also have a P.O. box open. All of that info is down in the description. I also have patches for sale, so if you'd like to get your very own, you can click right over here. There's also a link down in the description. Overall, thank you very much for watching, guys, and don't forget to stay spooky.